Hello, 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 and welcome to our Thursday event of the Wheel with Me Summer Spirit Summer Empowerment Week. We are so stoked to have you guys here. Thank you again for taking another hour out of your night to join us. Today we have Dr. Tepper, and you guys, this course is not going to disappoint. Very excited. He has years of experience, has been studying this as his career, and we are going to learn about how to be a sexual version of us. Woo! All right, so before we get started, for sure, I do want to say, if you have a manual wheelchair and you have not won a set of tires yet today, go ahead and drop your name in that chat, and we will enter you into winning a set of Kenda tires. So if you have a manual wheelchair with pneumatic air tires, please drop your name in the chat to be entered into the giveaway. Without further ado, Dr. Tepper, if you want to take over, we are so excited to have you. Thank you for your time tonight too.
Oh, you're welcome. That's quite a buildup. And, you know, I watched the last couple of shows, so I know some of you here have been participating all week. And so it's a really tough act to follow these really energetic women. I watched the vertical blonde taking off her coat of judgment, you know, and, you know, I tend to watch YouTubes in like 1.5 or 2, you know, so for a while I'm like, oh, she's really moving, you know, because I don't really notice that the speaking, you know, like speaking different, but then, oh, let me put it down to normal. And then she was just like, you know, not going quite as fast as I thought. But anyway, I was asked to use slides. So that makes me a little bit, I mean, I use slides because it keeps me focused, but it's also going to be a little more stale, but it's just us. So you can ask whatever you want. Don't let the slides like impede you from saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't understand that. Or, you know, that's a little too esoteric for me. You know, can you kind of tell me that in something that's more practical? So, you know, this talk is focused, I don't want to say the less practical, but the more esoteric, right? So I was showing Jesse before, you know, I've got like a lot of tools. You know, like specialty vibrators, you know, for men who have difficulties, and you know, I got toys all set up here, but we're going to go through what I think is the fundamentals for setting you up so you could have really the greatest sex of your life. And you might think you're already having it, but who knows, maybe it could get better. So, oh wow, I had this all set up to share. Here it is. Jesse's putting her hand in my face. She's saying, stop. We are waiting for slides to prepare again. I loaded them up thinking that was enough. I almost did this in a tank top today, you know, because like women could present in tank tops, so you don't always usually see men. But, you know, Jesse's always showing off her stuff. So I'm going to show off my stuff with my slides prepared. Oh, here we are. So we're talking about secrets to sexual self-discovery. And this is my formula for accessing the best sex of your life. So I've been doing this for, well, I broke my neck 39 years ago. So my sexual rehabilitation and my sexual research started in the hospital, okay? And then I took it to a new level. I left, you know, I finished a degree in finance and then went to banking, and then durable medical equipment sales, and eventually went for my PhD and became a sex doctor. So here we go. So can anyone tell me what this is? The picture. Any guesses? It's okay to be wrong. You don't have to be right. You could take your mics off if you want. No one's guessing.
I have no idea.
Well, this is your brain on orgasm. It truly is. This is actually a slide that was lent to me by a fellow researcher, Dr. Komisaruk at Rutgers. And some of my early research was in the lab, specifically with women with spinal cord injuries, women with complete spinal cord injuries, looking at various stimulation and seeing, what's the effect on pain, spasticity, and pleasure, including orgasm. And this is from an EEG of a woman stimulating her clitoris, and it goes from 2 minutes before to 2 minutes after. And the brighter yellow colors is the heat, the hottest heat, the area of the brain during orgasm. So it goes from cooler to hotter and then goes to cooler again. And I like to use this slide as, real scientific proof that orgasm is a brain-mediated event. So everything you've been talking about over the last few days about mind over matter, about attitude, right? I just take that and apply it to the sexual situation, right? So we all have the ability to experience, situations or, states that are orgasmic, blissful, ecstasy, if we play the right attention with the right intention. So, you can stimulate, and people know this, the airs sometimes become very erogenous, and with the right intention and the right attention, that may lead to great pleasure and even orgasm. Whereas if you're not expecting it and someone wets their finger and sticks it in your ear, it's like gross, right? But a properly placed tongue at the right moment might put you over the edge, right? So, we have to be open to experiences that go way beyond, what's happening in our genitals. So this is, really my summary is like, I sometimes call it love potion number 9, got to be cute. But these are the 3 trifectas, right, that will lead to great sex. And I will get into each one a little bit deeper. But the first trifecta is trust, safety, and connectedness. And I heard, some talk about trust, right, over the last few days. And I'll get into this more, but my research demonstrates that trust and safety, that context, that container in which we have a sexual relationship, fosters a sense of connectedness, and trust, safety, and connectedness has the ability to transcend any physical loss and result in great pleasure and even orgasm. So that really takes care of the context of which you have sex. The next is stop, focus, and connect. And we'll talk about that more, but that's getting yourself in the right place. And then last, which is the formula that you need for all the logistics of sex. And that's, probably the more fun stuff is creativity, adaptability, and a sense of humor. So it's a little busy here and I'm blocking there, but I always like to focus on pleasure. The self-proclaimed prophet of pleasure. We're in a goal-oriented, goal-directed society, and especially around sex. So goal-directed sexual experience goes from touching, kissing, caressing, and then it's a heterosexual model with vaginal penis contact, intercourse, and orgasm. And when we set ourselves up for that, and what happens is if you can't reach your goal, often people just give up, right? And I'll get into that from a research standpoint. Where a pleasure-focused experience or a pleasure-oriented experience, are you seeing both things on your screen? Are you seeing a circle that says pleasure-oriented? Okay, great. Can start anywhere and it doesn't have to go anywhere, right? So there's no goal of orgasm. It doesn't have to start with touching and kissing and, progressing from first base, second base, third base, and home, right? It could start with a caress. It could start with a text. It could start with self-touching, right? It could start with manual stimulation. Intercourse doesn't even have to be there. Orgasm doesn't have to be there. It can. So we want to keep our mind on pleasure and avoid putting too much pressure on ourselves to have an orgasm or for things to be like they used to be. So this is a little complex diagram or cartoon, but this was the essence of my research on orgasm, men and women with spinal cord injury. So I said I did laboratory research with women with complete injuries, but then for my dissertation, I followed up with men and women who either self-described themselves as either having orgasm or not having orgasm. So, and I'm an educator. My PhD is in education. I'm interested in how people learn about sex and how they learn about sex before they have injury. And generally, people learn about sex from having sex, right? Maybe printed materials. This was a long time ago. Nowadays, it's porn, right? Porn, unfortunately, has become the primary educator, and it's not very accurate as far as for education. Entertainment might be fine. People learn from friends who learn from magazines, who learn from having sex, and people learn from a partner different than just friends or having sex. It was a partner they were with that they actually, experimented with and learned over time. So it was less haphazard. And so everyone I talked to experienced pleasure and orgasm before their injury. So that's where I don't know if I have a pointer here, but where it says enter. And can I point to my screen? Anyway, so everyone had that. And I asked people, tell me about your sexuality after your injury. And they said over and over again, it's not the same. It's not normal, And I was thinking like myself, well, I could get an erection. It stays there. I can't ejaculate, it doesn't always stay there when I want it. I was ready to hear stuff like that. But what I heard is it's not the same. It's not normal. And what is the same or normal for people, whether it's spinal cord injury, or I work with veterans, whether you stepped on a landmine, you lost your testicles, whatever it is, or you had prostate surgery. What's normal for people is what was normal for people the day before that trauma, before that incident, right? So people are comparing constantly to before. And we do that with ourselves. I used to be able to walk, I used to be able to do this and that, but we get used to moving on in life in a chair and doing things differently, but we somehow get hung up on sex and thinking that sex has to be the same in life and sex can't be the same. So people said, I don't have the same feeling. I didn't feel any escalation of arousal. I lost total feeling. I wasn't getting anywhere. So they said, it's pointless. Why bother? And I said, well, what were you thinking about? They were thinking about this is mechanical. This doesn't feel the same. So their mind was not in it. Their mind was full of negative thoughts while they were just mechanically stimulating their genitals. And then other people had lived, or what I call embodied experiences, unfortunately, sometimes with a partner, and that partner maybe left them, cheated on them, or avoided having sex with them. And these things framed people's vision of their future, their sexual future. And they, once again, had a bad experience with masturbation or a bad experience with a partner, and they said it's pointless, why bother? But I asked everybody, tell me about your peak sexual experience. I am in the business of helping people optimize their sexual pleasure. And I'm used to, and I want to look at peak performance, peak experience, so that what can we learn from people's peak experience? And that's where the concept of trust. I needed to be someone I trusted. It didn't have to be a long-term relationship. Sometimes it was a newly injured person in a hospital meeting somebody else with an injury or a different experience with more experience that was basically their shepherd, that taught them some tricks, right? But they trusted them, they felt safe with them because it was someone else with a disability. Oftentimes people went 10, 14, 18 years without pleasure or orgasm because of the early negative experiences. And then they met a new partner and they trusted that new partner. They felt safe with that new partner. And that led to the experience of a sense of connectedness and pleasure and orgasm. So that's where I get the trust and safety leading to connectedness. And there was more, I'm in the way of my circle here, but there was more excitement and pleasing the other person. That doesn't mean all the pleasure was pleasing the other, but some people received orgasmic responses in pleasing others. And so there's some magic that happens sometimes when you're focused and you're in the moment, and there's kind of a merging of bodies. You don't know where one starts and the other finishes. And I believe a lot in energy, and we are energy, and the force, the life force, is sexual energy, right? We're born from sex and we're created from sex, and it animates us. So that, connection, that trust, safety, and connectedness really can change your sexual experience and change your sexual response. So what I learned, from this is that pleasure and orgasm after injury is the result of this process of sexual self-discovery. And the process is reflective of how we learned before our injury, right? Haphazardly, by masturbating, by trying, maybe by asking somebody. But there hasn't been a real organized way in rehabilitation to teach people. And I've been training health professionals for almost 30 years, right? But I don't believe in the trickle down approach. That's why I'm always doing these programs, because I hardly ever raise your hand if you had great sexuality education or sex counseling in your rehab. I don't see any hands. Am I missing any? Okay. So, that's the point, so, people aren't well educated, they're not prepared, they go on haphazardly, and negative experiences get, solidified as the truth. And that is not the truth. So, I had all that busy stuff, and people said, "Oh, this is great, Dr. Tepper, can you make it more easy?" So I created a book called Regain That Feeling: Secrets to Sexual Self-Discovery. People living with spinal cord injury share profound insights into sex, pleasure, relationships, orgasm, and the importance of connectedness. And so that book, some people read it and they want, "Oh, I want to know how to have sex." Well, I have free information I have out there, brochure stuff I did for United Spinal. You search United Spinal, sexuality after spinal cord injury. I could maybe later on send you a PDF that gets into all the nitty gritty, right? But all that doesn't matter if your head isn't in the right space, if you don't believe you're going to have a better outcome than you've had. And to take what, I do qualitative research, and so it's not, in order to validate it, you see, one, does it make sense to you guys, right? And two, do other people share these experiences? So, I have, some colleagues in Canada who do research around peak sexual experiences. And so here are some descriptions of what people at different ages described as optimal sexual experiences. And they talk about being present, focused, and embodied. And so when I talk about being stop, focus, and connect, we're going to get more into being present and focused. Feeling of connection, alignment, being in sync, experiencing intense sexual and erotic intimacy, enjoying extraordinary communication, so transformation, feeling of healing. No one mentions how far they squirt or how powerful their contractions are around their vagina, right? That's not how people are talking about their peak experiences, at least not people in the research, right? So here are some, conclusions I draw from my research and from my book. One is pleasure is not merely a physical sensation, right? So it's a state of consciousness experienced through our senses, perceived through cognitive processes. That's shaped by our attitudes, beliefs, knowledge, desires, and life experiences. So if we are full of misinformation, if our life experiences are negative, then we may not experience the pleasure. As I said, this is the brain-mediated effect. And as Jesse says, what you feed yourself, what you feed your brain, right, is going to affect, how you react. And sexual pleasure is a vital component of mental health and overall quality of life. It's not just sugar on the top. It's something that's important. It's essentially motivating factor. I've got a great friend, I won't mention him, going back almost 40 years. As long as I've been injured, he's been injured. Whenever I go up to Connecticut, we hook up. But he used to say, "Hey, Mitch, right now he would go to, a spa and get yanked, and he said, I'll find, and he would sell weed on the side. This is a long time ago. And he said, I'll find a job. and I'll look for actually a serious girlfriend, once this is going on, because right now he's not motivated. So he found in reverse, he met somebody, then he went got a job, and he's been getting people out of nursing homes for 30 years. But it was the motivation he got through being in a relationship, in which actually makes us feel whole again, right? It makes us feel like we're needed. So really, pleasure is more than a sensation, it's an affirmation of life. An orgasm happens between your ears. I guess I can't tell you that enough. Not just between your legs. I showed it to you in the slides of the brain. We know, or I told you, and I could show you research, that nipple stimulation, air stimulation, head stimulation, all of it can lead to orgasm, to the same things that are going on in your brain. So when we talk about genital orgasms, we're talking about, when people use that term, orgasms that are basically facilitated or triggered through genital stimulation. And we talk about non-genital or extragenital orgasms. Those are orgasms that are resulting from anything else. So, we know the other woman that I studied with and did research with is Dr. Beverly Whipple. Has anyone ever heard of the G-spot? Okay, I see one smile, Angela. She is the G-spot lady. She did the research of the G-spot in her labs and wrote the book, The G-spot. So Barry and Beverly, those are my mentors and the people I did research with. She did research on women who could have orgasm through fantasy alone, right? And when I talk to people about, especially men, well, have you ever had a wet dream? And women have wet dreams too. But I was sleeping, I had a dream, right? So they weren't masturbating, they weren't touching their penis, they weren't touching their body. Your fantasies in your dreams trigger what's going on in your body, and you could have a wet dream, or you could have a dry dream, if you can't ejaculate. So, the research we did created new definitions of orgasm that make them much more accessible for everybody. And I talked about trust, safety, and connectedness matter more than physical and genital function. All of the research, level and completeness of spinal cord injury does not determine sexual satisfaction, and it does not differentiate those who experience orgasm from those who do not. Now, it does differentiate who will get an erection, who will keep an erection, who will ejaculate, who will lubricate, how much you'll lubricate, whether your clit will, throb. So these things are physiological and are related to the level of injury. And we could talk about that later if you want. But they do not disqualify you from pleasure and orgasm. So peak sexual experiences happen within the context of trust and emotional safety. It doesn't mean you can't have a hookup, but we're talking long-term and consistently. And really, for people after injury, the most significant factor that affected post-injury sense of sexuality was a relationship with a significant other. So a good and a bad relationship can have good and bad influences over how you're doing. Now, there's another thing, we think about hormones and sex and testosterone, and sex is this hormonally influenced thing, this sex drive. Well, take it from me, as I age and other people, it's not all about this hormonally driven drive. It's a calling card for intimate connection. So, is desired, it's what your heart wants, what your soul needs, and your gut says. I believe we all have a yearning for connection, and we might have great friends and family and love, but we want someone to love and love us as a whole person. And as we're sexual people, we want to be valued and appreciated as a sexual person. And it only takes one relationship like that to sustain us for a long time. So we all have a desire to be accepted and unconditionally loved as sexual human beings. And when we are, we feel energized, we feel filled, fulfilled, revitalized, alive, and as a person of value. You all with me? I mean, sometimes I talk about these serious things and it's like solemn, but even these are important learnings. And the first step here, and awareness and acceptance, leads to transformation. And I know the vertical blonde, I forget her other name, but she talked about, having to break down the muscle to build a muscle, right? And post-traumatic growth. We need to acknowledge our brokenness. I didn't write this. I wrote this years ago, way before I listened to her talk about, her stuff yesterday. We have to acknowledge that we are broken. Things have gone awry, right? We are vulnerable, right? And it takes vulnerability really to achieve like the greatest pleasure. Side note, I don't know. My wife was watching, what's the guy's name? The devil. What's the devil's name? Lucifer. And it was the fourth season. He becomes vulnerable. He's in love with this detective, and he can walk through fire and not get hurt, but she touches him with a pizza glass and he bleeds, right? So Hollywood knows this. So we acknowledging our brokenness doesn't mean that we have to accept that. We have to accept it, but it doesn't mean we have to let it feel us like less. It means we have to respond to that with growth, with challenging ourselves, with learning more. So, and I'm a believer, so I believe that there needs to be a shared dependence on God. But if you don't believe that, I think you need to believe in the goodness of others, right? And she said, we're all good, essentially as humans, we're good, and we have to kind of have that orientation. Yeah, some people may prove otherwise, and we have to have the humility and the ability to be present in the moment, to really experience this stuff. And so I'm so glad I watched the earlier ones. She mentioned that love is not a feeling, love is an action. And I think this is something that so many of us who are in the profession talk about. So of course love is a feeling, right? It's like it was one of the strongest feelings. Usually with a big crowd, I'll do a forced choice. Is love a feeling or an action, right? Love could break our heart, right? But when Western love is viewed as the embodiment of Greek mythology, right? And it's the picture of Cupid shooting the arrow into your heart. It happens to us. So we talk about we fall in love, right? It's out of our control. And if it's out of control, then we're screwed, right? Who wants us? Who's ever going to love us? What can we do? We're not the same. I don't look the same. I'm not walking, whatever. I lost my job. I got nothing to offer. All of these negative thoughts, and it's not going to happen, right? So that's it. But the truth is, Cupid's arrow usually hits you in the genitals, not in the heart, right? So we're usually driven into relationships by basically our sexual feelings more than our overall knowledge of that other person and whether we like their qualities. But when love is actively focusing on the virtues of another person, it's intellectual and it's our choice and it's control, and we can control what we put out there, what we value. I help people develop their profiles and their pages for their apps and help them focus on what is going to lead to more meaningful relationships in the long run, versus a laundry list of external things that don't matter. So barriers to connection: anger, arrogance, avoidance, denial of our situation, fear and insecurities, low self-worth, misbeliefs about, disability and about sex, things we didn't learn properly. So anger goes to resentment and contempt, people in contempt aren't easy to be with, and people who are arrogant are often conceited and they just think about themselves. So these, being arrogant and being angry, is going to push people away. Avoiding sex, people do that, because they don't want to face another loss, right? And often people feel ashamed of, their bowel and bladder issues or the change in their body, right? All of these can lead us to avoid sex or, deny our sexual parts of ourselves. I had women say that, I got back to everything. I got back to being a mother and a teacher, but I put that part of my life on this shelf, right? Because I didn't want to face another thing. So, we want to, be conscious of those barriers. And, like the vertical blonde said, none of us are perfect, and these things come to mind. It's beginning to be aware of them and to change our focus when they do. I don't know how much time I'm going to spend on this. It's incredible, powerful model. It's called the sexual tipping point, right? And it explains so much things for a lot of people. So we're talking about sexual excitation and inhibition, right? And an easier way to understand it in this book, Come As You Are, she talks about the gas and the brake, right? And so people are usually trying to step on the gas to increase desire, to increase sexual intensity, right? So that's why you see, all these magazines advertising vibrators and lotions and all this other stuff. But you also see a pharmaceutical industry totally frustrated with women because they've tried Viagra and they've tried testosterone, and these things aren't doing it for women, right? For men, they work because men see an erection and they're happy, even if they can't feel it, right? And so as long as we get an erection and we can please a partner, we're not asking a lot of questions about how does it feel, or how am I really aroused? Am I really into what I'm doing, right? And so, but pharmacological companies, because like using sildenafil, Viagra in women, actually the only big research study that showed some promise was with women with spinal cord injuries. And I know why. Pharmacies don't know why. I do, because when I take something like Viagra, I could feel the overall body effects. I could feel an increase in kind of like a flush to my face. So when you do research, there's usually something called a placebo effect. They give you a sugar pill. And I think that when we perceive some of those changes, like warmth, we connect that with sex and sexual response. And so, it showed some promise in in women with and without spinal cord injuries. I'm just going to say Viagra for simplicity's sake. It did increase lubrication, but it didn't increase the sense of arousal. And testosterone didn't necessarily increase, desire. And so what we need to focus on, in addition to things that stimulate us, things that excite us, things that turn us on, is to working on the stuff, the mental factors, the emotional feelings, and those things that are actually causing us to have our foot on the brake. And why the great brake and gas works is that because those of you who can remember driving, if you drove when you could use your feet, if you have the emergency brake on, or if you have your foot on the brake and you step on the gas, the car is not going anywhere. But if you just have your foot just lightly on the gas and the brake is off, you're going to be going, right? So it's as important to look at those factors that are getting in our way. That's stress, fatigue, medication. I work with veterans. They're on 8, 10, 12 medications. It's amazing they're functioning, And so, if you're treated for sleep issues, if you're treated for pain, spasticity, right? Trauma, right? You're on a different pill, and those all can inhibit your sexual response. So the benefits of taking care of your sexual health: regain that feeling. You're feeling alive again, feeling whole, feeling like a weight is taken off your back, So don't put this thing on the shelf if you really want to get back into being a sexual person and enjoying your sexual life, because it weighs you down. It leads to better relationships when you begin to address it. It leads to more pleasure in your life, and it leads to really just more fun when you're having sex. So any questions before the next?
There are currently no questions, but if anybody has a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat and we'll get it to Dr. Tepper.
Okay, so this comes to the stop, focus, and connect. So I spent a lot of time on context and your mind and where we're going. And now we're getting a little bit more practical. So I do a workshop on accessible tantra, mindfulness and the yoga of sex, right? And so mindfulness, who's heard of mindfulness? All right. Who practices mindfulness? It's a good thing. It's a good practice. And it's accepted now everywhere. The VA uses it. It's accepted in psychology. And who practices yoga? Anybody? There's a lot of accessible yoga. You can take it online, the Impossible Dream, you could go anywhere. I recommend people practice both mindfulness and yoga. Now, mindfulness and yoga, right, are both somewhat devoid of sex, right? They all come from the same foundation as Tantra, but Tantra is this taboo thing because it's been associated with sex. And I do a whole talk on Tantra, but basically Tantra in its essence isn't about sex. It's a way of life, and it's about unattachment, and it's about increasing awareness in the moment. So it's really a lifestyle. But we all learn what I call either a medical model of sex or the friction model of sex, which means if we put the appropriate friction to the appropriate place, the head of the penis, the clitoris, whatever, more friction, that it's very mechanistic. But if we put the appropriate friction to the right place, it will result in a buildup of muscular tension, a peak of excitement, a release, whether that's been contractions around your pubococcygeal muscles or ejaculation. And then orgasm under the medical model is just an autonomic reflex, right? So they're really not looking at the experience. I've read a lot of literature on orgasm, and they really boil it down to like overstimulation creating this response, and it's a reflex, just like your leg spasming. If that's all an orgasm is, I'm not going to spend so much time on it, right? So we learn this medical model of sex, but the Eastern model, the tantric model, we need to stop. We need to slow down, right? We need to slow down the thoughts in our head. We need to slow down what we're doing with our partner. We have to increase our awareness. And that's where mindfulness and yoga, because yoga, the way I learned it, is primarily a breath practice, right? It's controlled breathing during stretching, but it's in its essence is about breathing. And so breathing is very important. So if we take mindfulness and breath practices that we learn from yoga and have the appropriate intention towards a pleasurable sexual encounter, and we pay attention to ourselves and our partners, this is going to lead to orgasm, to bliss, to contentment, to transformation, all different experiences people have. So we have to increase awareness of what's happening with us, what's happening in our body. We remain in the moment. We make contact if we can make eye contact with a partner. We use our breathing and vibrations, sound vibrations. People can't be afraid to make noise, even, to fake it, just because when you begin to make noise, it brings vibrations up and it brings sexual energy up, whether you have feeling or not, because our energy bodies, they extend beyond our body and they live and function outside the realm of the physical body. And I don't have time for this. There's going to be, I'm running a Lovability's virtual Sexuality and Disability Festival, and Ray Stubbs, who I learned so much from about Tantra, is going to be speaking about energy and different types of orgasm. That's October 20th through 22nd. So, really, to understand energy, we need to spend more time than I can spend right now. This is just, an overview, but, sexuality is about energy movement and energy exchange between people, between the universe, when people get a little bit more that. And a lot of it comes down to the ability to relax and to let go, right? We have to let go to these notions of what we think sex is about, that sex is about penis and vaginal intercourse and orgasm. It's not the be end and end all, and not everybody who has sex with somebody else who has a penis or or a vagina, right? There's people who have sex with same-sex folks, right? And there's folks I know who unfortunately lost their genitals because of an explosion. And, there's still pleasure and orgasm, and they don't lose their masculinity because they've lost their penis. It's devastating and it feels like that way, but the people who are able to come back learn that there's so many other ways to experience pleasure and to express their masculinity. So we talked about awareness, attentiveness to sensation, mindfulness, and being in the present. And fantasy, people told me recalling positive experiences help build their response. I was just on a show the other night on Tantra, and it's on, I think, the YouTube Sexual Sustainability, but it's a new series. And we were talking about that, and you'll hear other people, I'm an incomplete quad, other complete quads, talking about fantasy, and one guy talks about even Hector. He likes writing erotica, and that gets him very aroused. He likes phone sex, that gets him very aroused. And so if you're open to this stuff, that's all sex. It's not all about intercourse. So we have to tap into our subtle energy body. We have to stay sexually and spiritually connected. And, we have to look at alternatives to, quote, ordinary sex. And we have to add a lot of extra non-genital touch, plenty of time, and added stimulation of a vibrator. These are all things that helped people that I heard from people in my research that helped them regain pleasure. And accepting ourselves as we are, we can't beat ourselves up. We have to let go of preconceived notions of sex and orgasm and become aware of the feelings and sensations that we do have. I saw a question or a comment flash. Can you read that to me, please? Because I don't see them. I mean, I saw it flash, but I'd have to go out. I can't hear you, Jackie. Can you unmute?
Sorry. It was Tyler, when you asked if anybody does mindfulness and yoga. He does both of them.
Oh, great. Well, great. Maybe next time they have something, Tyler, you could lead some classes, or we could do something together, combining, sex and mindfulness and yoga.
Jesse, you hear that? That's an idea.
It's an idea. So here's the fun part, and we have 15 minutes left. This is where we get to creativity, adaptability, and a sense of humor. On my website, which is just drmitchelltepper.com, and Jesse's probably hasn't got it in a link. I have a sex and paralysis video series. So I only have a para there. I have a woman who's a para using furniture and showing how it's, she uses it and it's much more comfortable, and she gets more pleasure, and she could get in positions with her back that are not causing pain, right? Now, I'm not going to get the URL right, but if you search Mount Sinai, spinal cord rehab, they followed up on some of the videos I did. They had a grant, and they have some women with higher levels injuries in their video, so they have a quad. One of the biggest questions, tens of millions of people have watched my stuff either on YouTube. Unfortunately, YouTube took the women's video down, so it's on Vimeo and accessible through my site. Wanted women with higher levels, right? I'm the man demonstrating. So, but there's sexual positions for men, there's sexual positions for women, there's vibrations to increase sensation, there's like tantric touch, and I don't know, mindfulness. I have 6 up there, all available for free. And there we go. Which did I miss? Vibrators. Oh, don't let paralysis keep you down. So that's like solutions for erectile dysfunction. So, I've got, showing people, and this is, if anyone wants to know more, for men, some men need an injection. So I, demonstrate on how that stuff, they put getting medication into the penis, which allows blood flow and hardness. And, for women or for men to please their partner, or for men to please themselves on their nipples or wherever they want. It's not a very strong vibration for men, but I like this particular one. I think it's called Eva, because it's, well, You can, I should do this up here where you could see it. I could stretch it over my fingers, shove it in here between, so you can see my quad hand. And so I don't have great finger performance, but it stays there. And I could turn it on with my head. So it's got this big flat button, right? And so if you want to please yourself, you can, but like if you're with a partner, you put this over their vulva, right? They could feel the warmth of your fingers, right? So you don't need finger function. They could help you place it, even if you're quad, they could put it on your finger and you'll lay next to each other. They can help you place it on them wherever they want it. So, you know, you could be a more active partner in what's going on. For men who want to ejaculate, I think I showed this thing before. This is the vibrant. So we found out sometimes for men who have spinal cord injuries and one vibrator doesn't work, sometimes doing a vibrator on the upper side and lower side of the penis works. And so they created this vibrator that will stimulate both the dorsal and the other nerve. The Ferticare is another. These things are very powerful. Now they have an attachment for women, but these are what we call, they have they're medical, well, this is not prescription anymore, but they have strong, what we call a high frequency. So any vibrator that has a frequency adjustment that goes high, they call it a rheostat, but anything that has a dial adjustment. And if you touch this is brutal, but this is called peak to peak amplitude. So if you get a big mother massager, like with a long end and a big head, right, that has a lot of frequency and a lot of peak to peak amplitude. So guys want to try to ejaculate, they can't. Once again, I've written an article on that. There's safety issues because usually we have some autonomic dysreflexia issues if you have an injury above T6. So we have to, you know, properly medicate, keep track of your blood pressure. But, you know, basically vibro stimulation is one way. And I wrote another article on ejaculation affirmation, why it's so important for men to ejaculate, why it's so important for partners to see their or know their men ejaculated, and for partners of people with spinal cord injuries, specifically men, when they can't ejaculate, their partners are sometimes confused and wondering, he can't finish, what do I do? That's what women say to me, even women of veterans who are on medication that don't have spinal cord injuries, and their medication is keeping them from finishing. So we're used to ejaculation as the finishing, it's a script, that's the end of the sexual activity. And, you know, and people are lost when that doesn't happen. But anyway, in that article, I also talk about electrical stim, using your TENS unit to stimulate ejaculation. And, you know, some women report that they could put those pads in particular places and it stimulates orgasm for them too. So I'm going to turn off the slides because I got through all of them. I wanted to make sure that this wasn't all about sharing slides. Whoa, no, I don't want to leave the meeting. Escape, no. I found my stop share button when I did that. All right, so I stopped sharing. I see you all. Let me do this like grid thing. No, I think if I do the grid thing, they won't get the recording. Anyway, I could see some folks. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to listen and answer whatever questions you have.
You can put it on grid. It won't mess up the recording because Jackie has you pinned on hers.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. Got gallery. I'm in gallery now. So, and I could see there's 14 people here, right? 1, 2, 3. Well, I could see everyone with a camera on. Millie, I think I know you. Do you know me?
Yes, I believe we've met once or twice, and
Yeah.
we've been in communication via email in the past. Yes.
Yeah, you're up from more New York up ways that way?
Yes, sir. I'm in New Jersey.
New Jersey. That's where I was going to say New Jersey, Jersey girl. We go way back. Like before I was ever, I'm in Atlanta for 15 years. I mean, we go back like in the beginning, before I had a PhD, Millie.
Yes.
So before I had a PhD. Well, hi.
Hello, great to be here. Glad
So
to
she
hear
could
you.
attest, you could tell them I've been doing this for a long time, right?
Very much so. Always great though, honestly, always great. And no matter how many times I've seen you speak or read anything, I've learned something new. So
Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, you can drop them in the chat. Either send them directly to me or, I mean, Jesse really can't read anything right now. But so
Yeah.
that way you can stay anonymous if you would like to.
Or you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask any questions.
Oh,
Like,
you want to turn off the recording now? Would that feel safer? So it's
yeah,
not
yes.
up on
Let me-
YouTube for perpetuity. So
Yeah,
then it
let
would
me-
be just us.
I'm going to close out the recording real quick.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking your time to watch this. The links to Dr. Tepper's book, website, and the video series are down below in the description. Please take a moment, watch these resources, and educate yourself because you deserve to have a great sex life. Thank you guys so much for watching this.